Hello and welcome to my new podcast, Air and Space Stories. Are you ready for an exciting news? Fasten your seatbelts and enjoy your flight with me, Cinzia. This is episode 5, season 1. No to space geopolitics, yes to space research. In this episode, I will tell you about some alternative space programs to those of the European Space Agency or NASA. Over the years, some more recently than others, emerging countries have joined the space race, aiming to catch up with what Europe and the United States have achieved so far. I refer to the following countries: India, United Arab Emirates, China and Japan. Most of them intend to carry out their research to push their technologies, mainly to improve the lives of their citizens autonomously, freeing themselves as much as possible from the known powers in the sector. The Arab Emirates, on the other hand, prefer to collaborate with other countries, taking advantage of their international relationships to improve faster in the sectors in which they want to impose themselves or to try to impose themselves, such as aeronautics and space. This is why they invest in strategic companies in Europe and US. So far, the UAE space programs is limited, although their vision's quite ambitious, to become a leader in space. In the episode on space mining, I talked about the lunar rover Rashid, launched last December on the lunar surface to collect samples utilizing a Japanese rocket in view of that collaboration. The Emirates have their space agency and their own space center with its website, where not only the main missions and satellites they have launched into orbit are illustrated, but above all, they make the data collected by the Hope probe, launched in 2020, now orbiting around Mars, fully available. It is interesting to see how the Red Planet is also at the heart of the Emirates. The Mars 2017 mission was created with the same intent as the SpaceX Starship, to establish a permanent colony of humans on that planet with atmospheric and environmental characteristics completely different from our Earth. For this reason, Emirates will implement life-supporting technology. The UAE collaborates with ESA, NASA, JAXA and CSA and participates in missions on the International Space Station. For example, in 2019, the first Emirati astronaut went on board. The second country I want to tell you about is India, which boasts an up-to-date website, also bilingual, that illustrates the space program. This program is mainly aimed at research and, above all, the development of satellites to be put into orbit concerning various disciplines like meteorology, Earth study, navigation, including the GPS, mapping environmental disasters, telemedicine, telecommunications, and finally, education. More than conquering space or establishing itself as a leader, India intends to develop the country's technological capacity and knowledge of Earth. I am very much in favor of using the space economy to improve the current situation on Earth. When people insinuate the Hamletic doubt, why spend so much money to go into space when there are so many problems to be solved on our planet? Well, this is the answer. As far as space missions are concerned, the Indian Space Agency states that as many as 121 missions, 88 launches and 13 satellites to study the planet have been completed so far. Future ones include the Chandrayaan-3 scheduled for 2024 in collaboration with JAXA to complete the study of the lunar surface, the Aditya to study the Sun, and finally the Gangayaan project that will take 3 men into space at 400 kilometers high in the atmosphere to complete the development of the technology needed for manned space travel. I don't think the Indians have a specific name for their astronauts. For instance, the Russians call them cosmonauts from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, and the Chinese call them taikonauts from Taikon, space. The next country I want to talk about is China, of course, which has a real space program like India. This is research and development not aimed at conquering space hegemony. No geopolitical repercussion, as on the other hand I expected. The official website of Chinese Space Agency shows in full the text of a white paper explaining the main reasons why they developed their space program. It's very interesting, the use of space technology for the development of sustainable goals in the country. As many as 17 growth points were highlighted. For example, eradicating poverty and hunger, increasing education and welfare, promoting gender equality, sanitizing water and greening industry, and finally fighting the climate change. I hope this is not just propaganda. A bit of history. The Chinese Space Agency was founded in 1959, at that time in collaboration with Russia. The intention was to use space for military defense, as it was thought that launching missiles and satellites would allow China to gain a certain supremacy, especially at the nuclear level. After that, China broke away from Russia while continuing the exchange of technology and knowledge with that country. Over the years, space know-how increased until the fifth version of the Shenzhou program brought the first Chinese man into space in 2003, establishing China as a space power. Having reached this milestone, China asked the United States if they could collaborate on board the ISS by sending one of their taikonauts. Unfortunately, the United States forbade such collaboration, and this is the reason why China decided to design and build the Tiangong space station. Now, if you think about it, there are 2 space stations in orbit right now. But why we hear all the time about the ISS? We knew very little about the Tiangong. And yet, on last February the 9th, the first extravehicular activity, the famous EVA, took place right outside that Chinese space station. Let me spend a couple of words about this space station. This project was started in 2011 with the launch of the first prototype module and the second one in 2015. Then it began the official module assembly last April in 2022 and was completed at the end of the same year. The previous prototypes were destroyed on the re-entry into the atmosphere. China is not collaborating just with Russia, but also with Pakistan, for which it hosted an interesting experiment on board one of the Shenzhou missions to study new plants that will be more resistant to the external environment once planted back in Pakistan. Like the experiments conducted by Samantha Cristoforetti on the ISS, plants will grow on Tiangong in microgravity environment. Among past missions, Mars Explorer collected samples on the Red Planet. Regarding the future missions, the European Space Agency has recently backtracked on its collaboration with China. After it was officially announced that ESA astronauts will participate in missions on the Chinese space station, for which also Cristoforetti has been preparing, the European agency recently gave up, with the official reason being a lack of budget and a shortage of hours to devote to other projects. In my opinion, there is an afterthought related to the war in Ukraine. China has always sided with Russia. Speaking of which, that is the former space superpower during the Cold War, I'm sorry to understand that Russia has recently abandoned its space program. Again, I think for the same reason as said above, the war. Anyway, the Russian Space Agency, called Roscosmos, it's still in operation. The last astronaut launch was in May 2022. We all knew that the Soyuz has been replaced by Elon Musk's Crew Dragon. Anyway, a final mission in March of this year will replace the capsule now attached to the ISS, which, due to a technical fault, cannot guarantee the return of the cosmonauts to Earth. Finally, I would like to introduce you the Japanese space program, perhaps the most interesting after NASA and ESA. The Japanese Space Agency, formerly NASDA, became JAXA in 2003. Japan has a long history of launches. The first project dates to 1970. In 2013, they began the development of a new type of rocket called the H3 model, which was supposed to make its first launch on the 17th of February. The mission, unfortunately, was aborted due to technical problems within the first stage engine. The next launch is scheduled for the end of March. Japan has always collaborated with the ISS. The experiment module was built by them, and several Japanese astronauts have climbed aboard the ISS. Japan is also participating in the Artemis missions that will take the first colony to the moon. They will build some components of the Gateway orbiting station. In the field of the planetary exploration, the Japanese have launched many missions. Probes towards asteroids like Hayabusa, as I talked about in the space mining episode, orbiters around Venus. After a couple of them gone astray, the current has one orbiting the planet that revealed some atmospheric phenomena like those observed on Earth, and to Mercury. They also built the first solar sail, harnessing solar radiation for propulsion with the Icarus mission. Next, in 2023, there will be the launch of the SLIM mission, whose ultra-precise lunar lander will hit the target with an accuracy of 100 meters. And if you think that Apollo Eagles was able to get this target with an accuracy of 20 kilometers, you get the progress we made so far. Then the JUICE mission, in collaboration with the ESA, will go to Jupiter's icy satellites. In 2024, a Mars mission called MMX is planned to recover regolith samples. During the same year, a very interesting mission is the so-called Destiny Plus, a pilot project to demonstrate the feasibility of interplanetary travel. Another mission scheduled for 2025 in collaboration with India this time will explore the south pole of the moon. And finally, in 2029, there will be a mission that explore comets. Therefore, we can say, without a doubt, that the Japanese Space Agency is one of the most active in this sector. The Japanese have also built several ground-based telescopes and have sent at least a couple of them into orbit. The latest, HINDA, which started in 2006, is aimed at studying the Sun, and two more new telescopes are planned. The first, an X-ray telescope, leaving this year, and the second for the analysis of the ultraviolet spectrum, leaving in 2025. Of course, Japan has also numerous Earth observation satellites, many in collaboration with ESA, with which it will also participate in the Earth Care project. The United States are certainly not in standby, since they are fully immersed in the Artemis mission, which, after putting man back to the moon permanently, will lead the first colony to Mars, as we already said. In this regard, a few days ago, Elon Musk with his SpaceX took a step forward in the Starship mission. They were able to light all the 33 engines of the booster that will propel that spacecraft to Mars. This test showed that the ignition procedure worked perfectly. The interesting aspect of this project concerns the Raptor engines, which are innovative compared to all others used so far for rocket propulsion. While all projects use liquid hydrogen and oxygen, Musk uses liquid methane instead of hydrogen for these engines for the first time in history. This choice stems from a profound analysis of the mission to Mars. Since he had to bring the astronaut back home, he imagined that it would be easier to produce liquid methane on the red planet because its atmosphere is rich in CO2, from which the CH4, the methane, and O2, the oxygen, can be obtained. Elon Musk is always one step ahead of all the others. He is not just privatizing space, making access to it cheaper, but also more sustainable. Not for nothing, he's the only one so far that have built reusable rockets that do not produce aerospace debris, potentially polluting the planet. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry to say that, India, Japan and China and all emerging countries are still at the early stage, only be able to make classic disposable boosters. I hope that this overview of the space program of emerging countries has sparked your curiosity to also follow these agencies whose aim is to improve life here on Earth and ensure a more peaceful future for their inhabitants. Thanks for flying with me again this week. I hope you had a very pleasant flight. I look forward to seeing you on board next week too. Bye bye from Cinzia.